So it's a pleasure. Thank you for the invitation and for the Women's Press to really bring us together, especially in these difficult times where I feel that we really need these opportunities, not only to share our thoughts, but to really recruit help, because we really need that. We need to go beyond kind of the conversation into the action that we need.
And as Senator Patricia Torres said, we have been campaigning together, but this is our first opportunity to present together. We have definitely been through some roller coasters together. And so we will each share a little bit about our experience that brought us into the political arena. We'll be talking about the notion of progressive solidarity, running through a variety of different themes that we think are relevant in the 21st century. And ultimately, we are pushing our community, which includes all of you, to move towards a paradigm shift in terms of how we do business. It's time out for business as usual, and it's time out for politics as usual.
But more than anything else, for me, it was finding what it meant to be a woman of color. I just didn't know what it meant to be a woman of color, because I come from a country where I am part of the majority. What it meant was that there were not many opportunities available to me, that the institutions that were in place to create opportunities for other women were not there for me. So I began my journey as a worker, working in a factory, printing bottles. And I come from Colombia, where I went to law school. And so I began my journey trying to find my way into a system where I am this minority woman, trying to look for opportunities, try to figure out how to speak the language, how to learn, and I find these opportunities in Minnesota. But along the way, what I find is that people like me and people like Nekima really have to work incredibly hard to find these opportunities. And then I realize that in Minnesota we have the largest disparities in the country, and that although the well-being, the outcomes for people, especially for white people, are very good, I find that children of color are being removed from their homes in child protection system at disproportionate rates, and that the overwhelming majority of the children that are reported to a child protection system happen to be Black and Latino and Native, and that these children became to the attention of a child protection system because they live in poverty, because they didn't have these opportunities. And many women who were victims of domestic violence actually ended up being victims of a system that took their children away from them.
I realized that enough was enough. I was tired of sitting at tables with people wearing fancy suits and a lot of letters behind their names, and being given that access because of letters behind my name and where I worked and all of those things, but realizing that at many of those tables we were just admiring the problems. And I would go back to my community. I moved to North Minneapolis in the fall of 2015, just a couple months before Jamar Clark was killed. And that experience changed my life in many ways, but it also took me back to my childhood of growing up in Jackson, Mississippi, and then moving to South Central Los Angeles, right in the midst of the war on drugs, and seeing the impacts upon the Black and Latino community in which I lived. And at a young age, making a decision that I wanted to make a difference. I didn't quite know how it was going to happen. I didn't know that politics was a way to make it happen, because so many of us haven't seen the political system working for us, right? That's part of why voter turnout is so low in certain parts of our community, where people are used to being mistreated. They're used to being disenfranchised. They're used to being excluded. They're used to elected officials ignoring them. And so they figure, well, why vote? What is it going to change? And so I never saw politics as a pathway to racial, social, and economic justice until what happened at the 4th Precinct after Jamar was killed, and having to be on the front lines with the people in the freezing cold and seeing so many of our elected officials really be indifferent as to the plight of a community that was suffering. I just said enough is enough. I am, after being really pressured by my friends I'm going to go ahead and run, and I'm going to leave the safety of the institution in which I worked, and I'm going to let the chips fall where they may. And so that meant stepping out into an environment that is really nice, right? You guys know you're nice, right? That's the reputation of people in Minnesota and people outside the state who visit here. They often remark about how nice Minnesota is. And so I'm knowing that I'm going into a nice environment that I've been a part of since 2003, but making the decision that I'm not going to play nice, that I'm not going to play the political games just to be elected, that I'm going to speak the truth in an authentic way. And even though that was one of the most challenging years of my life, I would do it all over again, especially when I look around and I see so many women of color who are now running for office, which is unprecedented in the state of Minnesota, and running in an authentic way, not in a way that means that they have to pander to the white majority. And no offense to anyone who is part of the white majority, but the reality is that this entire state system, even the child protection system that Senator Patricia mentioned, our criminal justice system, our economic system, every system you name, is meant to cater to the white majority, including our system of policing. And at some point, there comes a point in time where our silence with regard to what's happening in the system, as Dr. King said, becomes betrayal. So I made a decision that I'm not going to sacrifice the truth and sacrifice speaking in my authentic voice just to be accepted. And there have been many women of color in particular throughout American history who have taken a very similar stance, and those are the women that we remember. We don't remember the women who were nice and who were demure and who played it safe. We remember the hellraisers and the rabble-rousers and the women who said, I want the right to vote, I deserve the right to vote, I want to see slavery abolished, I want equal wages in the workplace. We remember those women, right? And so at some point we have to decide we're going to become those women, because what has being so nice gotten us? It's gotten us, as Senator Patricia said, some of the worst racial disparities in the country. And so I'm grateful that this brilliant woman saw what my campaign was about, and rather than run, rather than listen to many of her friends and associates who were probably concerned about her being associated with me. And I'm thinking I was a law professor for 14 years. Like, I'm not dangerous, right? But people are like, oh, you're voting for Nekima? Like I was like public enemy #1 or something. And I was thankful for the nasty woman in Patricia to step out and say, no, I'm going to support Nekima. I'm going to stand with Nekima. And here's why you should listen to what Nekima has to say and to vote for her and to support her campaign. And many of the people in this room who consider themselves to be progressive probably feel that they're forward thinking, that they want equitable policies, that they want to see a just and equitable society, that they want economic justice. But one of the things that I researched regarding the early progressive movement was that there was some connection to the eugenics movement, believe it or not, right? And this wasn't just people of color who were being discriminated against as part of that movement, but also within different European populations. So if you were Irish versus English, et cetera, you might face a certain type of discrimination in terms of whether you were worthy of higher wages in comparison to your counterparts who maybe were more sophisticated, more well-groomed, spoke better English or more proper English than you spoke, right? That was inserted into the movement very early, and it's really something we haven't actually dealt with. And sometimes we see it in disguise in terms of the way in which poor whites and people of color and immigrants and people with disabilities and also people who identify as LGBTQIA are treated, right? It's still an issue. And
so solidarity, the true definition of solidarity is unity or agreement of feeling or action, especially among individuals with a common interest. So what I find in politics is that we are being called with frequency to talk about a specific issue that is important to me. So people say, well, what is important to Nekima Levy Pounds is all of these issues around Black Lives Matter, incarceration, criminal justice reform. And Torres Ray, you're interested in immigration, child protection, child poverty, all of these issues around children. And then I have to stop and say, really? Not really. I also want to work on the issues that Nekima has been working on. As a matter of fact, they are the same issues. The children that I'm talking about, she's talking about their parents. I'm talking about their children. There are common issues. The issues of incarceration, what is happening today with immigrants at the border, they're the same issues. So I am being given a label that prevents me from looking at how do we work on this together in solidarity. I am given this box that I fit in, that I need to fit in, so that I need to come and talk about what is pertinent to my community, as if I am part of one community, of one voice. And I think that this is particularly true for women. Women are often asked and invited to be in these boxes. And some of us, carry that box of gender, and then we are assigned the duty of speaking or working on specific issues. In the Senate, for instance, seldom people in leadership will say, well, we want women in taxes, we want women chairing transportation, we want women in finance. Well, maybe education is for you, health and human services is for you. But let's don't talk about finance, because that will cover all of the finance of health and human service and education, everything. That will be a guy, that will be a man. So the issue of solidarity is not an issue that, in my opinion, only applies to the work that we need to do in politics and organizing, but is of how we think about each other and how we connect with each other to do the work that we need to do to advance each other. So when I hear Nekima saying how I made a decision and I came to support her, I want to say how privileged I was and how much I learned from you in a moment of cynicism in my own moment in politics, when I was losing hope that nobody listens. Nobody calls things for what they are. Everybody's talking about disparities, but there is no action. And you bring that perspective of, you know what, no, I'm going to call things for what they are, and I'm infused in this energy. I am just going to do what it needs to be done. So there's this mutual gain in solidarity where maybe I have a title of a senator, but I don't have that lived experience and this connection and that strength that we need to move together to move the agenda forward. So for us as women, thinking in terms of solidarity means that we really need to be ready to step in to support each other all the time, not just sometimes, not just when it is about your issue, not just when it is about your agenda, not just when it is about, it's all the time. And I tell you, sometimes we may differ, and sometimes you may think, oh, well, she's just not the perfect candidate for this. Well, there is no perfect candidate for anything, but is the perfect candidate for the moment, and you will make it happen if you step in to the true definition of solidarity. Because guess what? We all learn, and we graduate into being that perfect candidate and that perfect leader. We all will. If we're seeking that position and that opportunity, we will get there, especially if you are there with us.